Background and criminal past. Billy Handsome was a cold-blooded, merciless killer from a young age. Unlike other criminals who may have turned to crime out of necessity or economic hardship, Billy developed a fascination with killing, relishing the act of taking lives. His nickname Handsome contrasts sharply with his brutal nature. While Billy might have appeared attractive and charming on the outside, beneath the surface was a deeply violent man with no moral restraint. Billy became infamous in the criminal underworld of Chicago during the 1920s and 1930s, a period marked by violence, corruption, and organized crime. Prohibition, which outlawed alcohol, led to a boom in organized crime, and Billy Handsome stood out as one of the most ruthless enforcers of that era. Working as a hitman for various mob bosses, Billy carried out contract killings in a savage manner. He was the go-to man for eliminating rivals, traitors, or troublesome witnesses, handling the dirty work without hesitation. His methods were notorious. Billy not only killed his targets efficiently, but he also took sadistic pleasure in the violence, often torturing his victims before finishing them off. He reveled in prolonging the act of killing for as long as possible. On the streets of Chicago, it was whispered that anyone marked by Billy Handsome could expect no mercy. Imprisonment on Alcatraz. Billy's brutal career as a murderer lasted several years until the authorities finally took notice. Despite the rampant corruption and bribery in Chicago's underworld, Billy had become too great a threat to be left unchecked. Eventually, he was caught and convicted of numerous murders and other crimes. His reputation as a feared killer was so severe that the authorities decided to send him to Alcatraz, a maximum security prison thought to be inescapable. On Alcatraz, Billy was imprisoned alongside other notorious criminals, including Salvatore De Luca, a mafia boss, Finn O'Leary, a swindler, and Albert Weasel Arlington, a con artist and inventor. These four men, each with a dark criminal past, formed the core group of inmates that developed the escape plan to break free from Alcatraz. Billy's time on Alcatraz was defined by his constant struggle with his violent past. Unlike Sal or Finn, who might have had personal motives for wanting to escape, Billy's desire to break out was simpler. He was a man who refused to be confined, no matter how high the walls. He wanted to regain control of his life, even if it meant resorting to violence once again. The escape plan and Weasel's betrayal. During their time in the prison, Billy, Sal, Finn, and Weasel devised a detailed plan to escape from Alcatraz. They intended to build an improvised aircraft to flee the island. However, from the start, the plan was plagued by distrust and tension, particularly regarding Weasel, who was never fully accepted by the others as a true member of the group. While Sal, Billy, and Finn held high standing within the organized crime hierarchy, Weasel was viewed as an outsider, a con artist who didn't truly belong. Billy, the ruthless killer of the group, was particularly skeptical of Weasel, suspecting that he might betray them. These tensions escalated into a deadly confrontation where Billy, Sal, and Finn decided to kill Weasel, believing he was sabotaging their plan. In that moment, Billy's deepest instincts surfaced. In a world where trust was impossible, violence was always his solution. The supernatural cycle of punishment. After killing Weasel, Billy and his co-conspirators found themselves trapped in an endless, supernatural cycle. They were condemned to relive the same escape attempt over and over without ever managing to escape. This cycle was governed by supernatural forces intent on ensuring the punishment of the four inmates. For Billy, who had lived a life of unrepentant violence, this was his eternal fate, caught in a loop of death and rebirth as punishment for his sins. Billy's role in this cycle is especially tragic, as he is a man who never showed remorse. He had always taken pride in his ability to kill and saw violence as his path to respect and power. But in this supernatural prison, his past meant nothing. No matter how many times he tried to escape or resorted to violence, he was trapped in a system that stripped him of control over his fate. Psychological profile: a man of violence. Billy Handsome embodies raw violence and ruthless brutality. While other characters, like Sal or Finn, may justify their crimes, Billy feels no need for excuses. He is what he is, a killer who doesn't let moral questions hold him back. In a way, Billy is the most honest character in Mob of the Dead, as he doesn't hide behind ideology or excuses. For him, life is a brutal game of power, and those who aren't strong enough are eliminated. His lack of remorse and his capacity for violence without conscience make him a deeply tragic figure. He is trapped in a cycle of violence that began in his life and now continues on a supernatural level. On Alcatraz, where the past and guilt of the inmates haunt them, Billy has no way to escape his own nature. Even in this cyclical nightmare, he remains what he always was, a killer. Supernatural influence in Billy's fate. The supernatural elements of Mob of the Dead add another layer of tragedy to Billy's story. The island itself seems to be a metaphysical prison designed to punish the inmates for their sins. In this hell on earth, there is no redemption, only endless repetition and suffering. Billy's attempts to escape are doomed because he cannot break the fundamental patterns of his life: violence, distrust, and betrayal. It is also suggested that Billy and the other inmates are being manipulated by forces beyond their control. The cycle they are trapped in is part of a larger cosmic plan to punish them for their crimes. For Billy, who never believed in an afterlife or the consequences of his actions, this punishment is particularly cruel. He had always relied on his own strength, but on Alcatraz, he learns that even he cannot escape the power of supernatural forces. Conclusion: Billy Handsome, the Eternal Killer. Billy Handsome is one of the most brutal yet tragic characters in Call of Duty's zombie storyline. His story is that of a man who lived his life in an endless cycle of violence and murder, only to be trapped in a supernatural loop that eternally punishes him for his sins. Billy's fate is inextricably tied to his violent past, and though he tries to escape Alcatraz, he remains forever caught in the cycle of violence he created.